Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing live show number 494. I keep wanting to say 500 because I'm pre-programming up the others and I've been in the 500s for a little bit. But thank you for joining us on the show number 494 this late January of 2025. From a cold Florida, cold for us anyway, probably a welcome temperature for most people considering how cold it is elsewhere. Um, but all said and same, it is a brisk time of year for us down here, cold as January, so forth and so on. And although we could probably get into the semantics of impact of weather when it comes to travel and travel choices, travel decisions, and some of the data we're getting from origin weather or destination weather being the major influencer to it, we're going to skip that today because we want to get to something else that actually, as I began expanding on this project for today's show, realized that it was more than just a single show. So, strangely enough, it's going to shorten the show because I only want to go so far in our conversation and then readdress it with a more in depth next continuation conversation later. And what I'm referring to is our topic today, which is same bait, no fish, how to fix reduced direct channel contribution. We're at that point now in our New Year's budget that we're 30 days in, or soon to be 30 days in. We're 24 days in. We haven't got our first month report, but we already know the trend of what's going on with our particular month in production and so forth, and the impact of what we had initially assumed versus what we weren't. It's a strange mix as to how successful or accurate January should be historically, because January is one of those months that is equidistant from when you first started deciding what your budget for the next year would be with a recent actualization of numbers. So if we started our budgeting process in August for what would be 2025, so August 2024, we're talking about 2025. January was only at that time 6 months old, data wise. So we were in that wonderful mid position, and here we are forecasting that would be only relatively something 6 months out, which means we have a little bit better handle on some of the predictability of what January potentially might be. Because not that you're in the booking window in per se, you do have some advanced bookings, but no indicators yet. But this year was very unique, as we've talked about in several shows, that because of the unpredictability of how our economies, our political sentiments, and so forth, decisions that would impact a lot of people's long-term decisions, especially related to travel, would be there was a higher uncertainty principle. So unlike other years where there might be some fluidity of being close to both ends that we're only 6 months apart from what we're forecasting, this one had a big what if, big question mark over it. And we're seeing some of the resultants of that as we speak, even now, every day that goes by, as to how things are happening. There's also the variabilities of weather, as I mentioned, being very, very cold here in Florida. That has a direct impact on short-term pickup and also cancelability of long-term plans. People are getting smarter and more capable of making a plan A and a plan B. If plan A doesn't end up being what they truly want it to be, they have already the contingencies of what the plan B would be like. That gets lesser of a choice when you start including pre-commitments like flight travel. If you're still going to fly to a place without cancellation abilities, then that short-term variable of weather really doesn't come into a factor. You're kind of patterned to finish your choices. However, if there's a drive market or a sentiment of short-term that you're looking at, and you have options as to where you can go with it, then that does have a stronger impact on whether or not you're going to go follow through with your weekend plans now that the weekend weather has shifted for you. So those all have impacts on what we're talking about today. The real thing about now is, as we're coming towards the conclusion of the first month, we're having a taste of the realities of what we anticipated versus the realities of what's coming through. With all budgets, as we've talked about many times, there is an aspirational aspect of a budget that is, quote, unrealistic. And sometimes January gets packed with unrealistic expectations because it can take a harder hit knowing that there's a high volatility to the month. And it's better to get the file out of the way early to be able to focus on more real numbers afterwards. Yes, no. I mean, there's two different camps about that. Other people just take the inverse, which saying, you know what, January is an easy mea culpa. It's going to be a bad month, or it's going to be a predictable month because there's so much less keystone events that happen in January's, less holidays to make impactful event-driven things, more weather variabilities, and more inclement weather in a lot of regions. I speak more domestically of that, but that is also globally. Obviously, with my Australian friends, this is just the inverse. Summer. And in New Zealand as well, we have a lot of followers and listeners. that are from both of those countries, and for them, this is that time of year where summer has a different influx to it, and there's a different shift as to the demand. But I'll focus on the domestic U.S. or North American mostly when it comes to what I'm discussing weather-wise. And so January is easy to take a hit. It's a low number. It's a low month. No reason to conflate it. No reason to have bad expectations already starting out of the gate. So there's two camps as to how January is handled. But there is one thing that is happening with just about everybody that I'm dealing with, both from a client level, professional level, and from a community level with my peer groups on Hospitality Marketing Club and so forth, is that there is a definitive shift in trend interest that we experienced at the latter part of last year, going into this year, as to what we're nicknaming as an uncertainty principle, because of all the flux of what had happened, what is going to happen, what could happen, all of those things. And we realized the first quarter is going to be a real telltale as to how well, which way of it's going to fall off the knife. Is it going to go to a positive? Is it going to go to a negative? But we have to be ready for both. But the one thing that is persistent is our direct channel contribution has changed. Very few has changed for the positive. More of it has changed to the negative. There is less direct traffic. There is more discovery awareness. There is more engagement with multiple platforms to see the lay of the land. What's out there? Our rates that we're offering, transportation costs to get to us, reasons to come to us, event-driven things and entertainment things, venues to enjoy when we're here, food and beverage things. There is a broader step back and let's look at a larger scope of what's going on. Is that because there's more and more tools that are being more helpful, where you get to, rather than craft a good question that you often had to do in a SERP page, you now have AI assistants that are burgeoning, AI agents that are burgeoning specific to tasks that says, we can be a virtual travel agent assistant. There's a lot of these are coming out. I even have one for us. The Hospitality Marketing Club has a AI travel agent that we're all bugging and playing with and figuring out how better to make it work for ourselves, which will help plan out things. You literally say, I'm interested in, it gives you some choices. And then from that, you select what you're more interested in out of the list that's been given to you. And then it gives you more information about those in contrast to each other. And then it starts borrowing into prices and values and places and things and events to help you quantify your category of discovery into an educational process. So how people are doing with their travel plans is shifting, which means there's less need to dedicate themselves to a choice by reserving or reserving early. But more importantly, to the topic of our discussion, is that it's less of a need of direct channel for them, rather than us showing up more for general awareness and curiosity through that discovery phase. We're now only being engaged with from a user perspective when it's more into the educational phase. That loss of engagement for us, we're seeing a direct channel shift for that. Now, some, ironically, are seeing better conversion values because by the time they get to the educational process with us, they're more certain about what they're wanting to do than at times past when they're just in the discovery phase. And so for that reason, the quality of the traffic is already coming a little better. So there's a positive to this, that enhanced product traffic being more interested in us means that we have a higher conversion rate capability of it. But that doesn't always translate to revenue because the choices are still in the educational phase. So we are still being compared to so much else that they haven't quite made the decision to pull the trigger for us, so to speak. So we're still, most of the industry is still approaching marketing strategy the way they did in 2024, 2023, 2022, on and on. They have their set prescriptions of channels. They have their budgets that they've allocated for those channels based on the historical successes and traffics associated with them. And that's what we started the year with. And here we are in January with that strategy. And we're already getting a lot of conversations, a lot of hand raising, a lot of, wait a minute, this isn't, the numbers aren't the way they were last year. They are different than they were last year. Whether it's a volume issue, whether it's a translation of value of the traffic, even though it's better qualified traffic when they are engaging with us, they are not necessarily, their engagement's going up, their time on site, their discovery within our website, the pages that are being viewed, the choices that they're looking at within our site are all improving, but the conversion value isn't echoing that to some degree. And that the booking window interests out are different than they had historically been as well. They're more interested in more myopic, shorter range durability things. There's very little, or in some cases, expressively far, far out choices that they're looking for opportunities of rates and revenues that are very low or haven't been changed yet. All said and done, direct channel, the old strategy, is not producing the same results. Good or bad, it's not the same. And as we know, the definition of insanity is trying to do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. So we are kind of following ourselves, going looking for a corner in a round room. It's not producing the same, even though we're doing the same. And so we keep replicating what we're trying to do in the hopes that it just goes back to what it used to do, and it's not doing that. The other is that we are approaching it from a point of nativity. Regrettably, historically, and I've mentioned this on shows before, when asked about what is the direct channel contribution, even the very definition of what's considered direct channel is questionable. Some companies include aspects of what they say is direct channel that other companies don't include in the direct channel. So the actual definition is tailored to the individual person you're talking to as to what they say is considered their direct channel. So that is one thing that has to get resolved. You have to define your direct channel in a way that everybody understands their impact value on it. There's a wonderful tool that we talk about today in the podcast called KPI Karma that helps you define KPIs in the tiered level of total goal versus contributing things versus supporting things to those contributing things versus the KPIs of each of those things as they relate to each other to show which ones are producing what value at the level that they're expected versus those that are not, and who's responsible for those KPIs to better impact the bottom line. That is the ultimate goal up top. That's our podcast today. But let's talk about the concept of that. First off, taking that we don't have a clear definition of all your direct channels, we'll take the ones that are more consistent with online direct channel. You're looking at your paid campaigns. You're looking at your organic campaigns. You're looking at your social organic. You're looking at your paid social. You're looking at your OTT and your DOE, the digital out-of-home items to it. You're looking at your CRM. Okay. Those are your predominant, and metasearch, sorry. Oh, can't forget that. Metasearch. You have these categorizations, and these are pretty much would be consistently referred to within your direct channels for most people. Others include and exclude others. With that being said, do you actually know, and this is a question that really I never get a good answer, and if I do get an answer, it's not an accurate answer, as to what the value of each of those channels' contributions represent to your property for any given time. They change each month depending upon the channel that is of higher value in January compared to February, or first quarter versus second quarter. They all vary as to what they contributed historically. Getting an understanding of what your contributions are from these sources that produce direct channel value will then know your impact value of what they can produce for them. Now, in our previous discussions of stress testing your budget, we talk about taking these channels, identifying what their contribution values are, of course, and then seeing how much can they augment a loss of a channel. So can your paid totally fill in your paid social loss or your social organic loss? Is it capable of doing that if you were to conflate the budget for it and the spend for it, transfer over the social to it? Can it compensate? The answer we discovered in most of our conversations is it can't fully compensate. It's a mixture of different channels that can, by enhancing what you're doing with them, reduce the negative impact of a loss of a channel, but not necessarily completely replace it. That being said, we also identified that there were some channels and specificities that if you did lose them completely, the channels could temporarily, at least, given circumstances being right, replace the value contribution of that channel for a period of time if they were amplified. So there is the knowledge of knowing what your channels are, the knowledge of knowing what their total value contribution per segment the channel is, and then they're individually broken down as to how each of those segments go. Following one of these branches, we're just going to do paid for right now as a way of understanding how this all breaks down. We've identified top line revenue, direct channel, indirect channel, online paid campaigns. In online paid campaigns, you have the segmentation between your opportunities of Google and Bing. Okay, we'll keep it simple for those two. And you have the types of, and we'll take Google for now. We'll just keep following that route. It's one of the larger routes of contribution, obviously. In Google, you have all of your campaigns. Maybe you have X number of campaigns, say 5. Those are all at levels of contribution towards what Google paid does, which does towards your paid campaigns, which does towards your top line revenue. See, it's like a workflow horizontally or a mind map for structure vertically, that it's part of the contribution to the top line. We have all these other things we could talk about. We're just taking this. And in that campaign, you have ads, ad groups. And in those groups, you have certain ads. So you break all of this down, and each one of them, depending upon their value proposition, have a percentage contribution towards the upward goal of what that particular facet is doing. So your ads have a contribution to an ad group has a contribution to an ad campaign, or to a campaign. Campaign has a contribution to Google ads. Google ads has a contribution to paid campaigns. Paid campaigns have a contribution to direct channel. Direct channel has a contribution to top line revenue. That's the progression we're following down in the string. You break all of this down into a percentage value of contribution so that you know that out of the, say, 5 campaigns that you're running, one is heavily weighted, your branded campaign is heavily weighted with about 40 to 60% of your total contribution. The remaining 60 to 40% contribution is segmented to other campaigns that are maybe more specific, event-driven. Let's classify them first. Secondary as non-branded, your branded, non-branded. Then you have your segmentations as to what aspect of each of those is related to it. You may have your food and beverage aspects related to it. You may have your spa related to it. You may have your destination related to it, and individual ad campaigns. And those all have a value of contribution historically that you know they're expected to perform at a certain level to contribute to the larger categorization they are a part of, which is a part of something of a larger categorization, on and on. I'm not going to keep harping on that, although I think I have. Anyways, with all of this in mind, you break this down into KPIs, key performance indicators. What should this ad in its ad group, in its campaign, of a campaign to paid, Google paid, what value does that represent? And you know this historically. You know that it produces a certain amount. That certain amount, in comparison to all of the contribution of the channel, is a percentage. It's simple math. That percentage is your KPI. We want this campaign, or more specifically this ad group, and this ad in particular, to represent a certain percentage persistently. If that's the case, and it performs below that KPI, that should gather your attention. Temporary or permanent is the first question you ask for that case. If it's performing above it, is it in contrast to something that's performing lesser? Like, is it cannibalizing or taking away from another ad? Or is it just performing better and the other ad is also performing as well as it's expected? In which case, there's an incremental value associated with it. Those are contrasting comparisons that you look at your KPIs. And you do this across the board. And what each then part that is supposed to produce at a certain level or percentage contribution, that KPI is now a way of understanding before it becomes a problem that then creates an issue. As we've discussed in previous shows, that dip in performance because campaigns or productivity has dropped off in certain channels, the discovery of that after it's too late, the designation as to what is the causation of that, the repair of that, the confirmation of the repair's ability to move forward for everybody that's involved in that decision tree, the launching of it, and the eventual recovery that it creates a dip in your productivity that you shouldn't have to have if prior to what would have been a reduction in performance, you saw the performance beginning to wane. At that point, you're making proactive changes and or replacements before that dip begins to create an impact. And because of that, you keep more of a maintained consistency. You may have a flux as to what it does because new initiations of campaigns or retraining of campaigns might have a period of transition to them, but that dip impact is minimized compared to the impact of loss, then discovery, then replacement, then recovery that we're talked about in other shows. I keep referring to other shows. Somebody told me the other day, so like, oh, you keep talking about other shows, and I caught this show, and I don't know what the other shows you're talking about. They are labeled and categorized. They are available, and you can go into hospitalitychannel.tv, and all of our old shows are there. You can check out categorically or by data broadcast or by co-host that's on it. But also, too, they're on YouTube. All the channels that we broadcast, simulcast on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, all of them have a history of, when you go to the channel, of all the shows, and there's the title for them. So the titles will represent content related to that show that you can find for it. And as always, our annual book is going to come out, Hospitality 2025, Hospitality Marketing 2025, sorry, which goes through and takes all of our best bite segments of the shows that we have done cumulatively that impact 2025 and impact general hospitality marketing that continue on as good choices to make in 2025. Go into our book. It comes from the shows. It gives us all the hyperlinks that we have of all the things we're referring to. We incorporate the tools we talk about in our podcast in there. They're related to the topics. So you can go look at certain tools that fix some of the things we're talking about. It's a fun book. We do it every year. A lot of people enjoy it, and we update it for free once you buy the book. Every year we just update the book. So it works out well. Anywho's, backwards to what we're talking about. So here we are looking at KPIs associated with the actual contributions of the granularity of what produces upwardly their value to the channel that they're connected to. You do this to all of your channels that contribute to your direct channel. So the question then doesn't turn into how do you fix what's ever going wrong, because every hotel is different. Every environment that creates the issues is different, as similar as most of them are. There's differences unique to each property, as all of us that work with properties and historically have done so will say that even though certain things work persistently everywhere I go, there's only certain things that work or don't work, that can work in certain properties because of how unique they are and what they represent for their market. This analogy of your KPI reductions is down to a granular level, and assigning who's responsible for it means now you're going to take the ability to eat the elephant. You have all of these KPIs, and it produces several of them, because think of what we just did for Google and breaking it down into ads that go into ad groups, that go into campaigns go into Google ads go into the paid media ads go into direct channel. Okay, we broke it down into actual ads to be able to see down to that level which ones are producing at the level that's expected into their level of contribution, to identify when there's errors or issues that comes up from it. You do that for your social, you do that for your CRM, you do that for your OTT, you do that for your meta search. You break it all down. So you're looking at an array of KPIs, and you now have to dice up the elephant. You have to give it in portions that are controllable, that these things are responsible for this person, these things are responsible for that person, so forth and so on. You break them down so that rather than having people hide from the ambiguity of, well, I don't know if that's directly related to my responsibilities, or I'm directly related to making the decisions about it, or I'm not the one that actually handles that aspect of our account, or I'm not the one that handles that channel. Whatever the delay factor is when people are wondering what's going on, gets obliterated. Now it's Lauren. You're in charge of Google ads. You're in charge of these campaigns. You're in charge of these ad groups. You're in charge of these ads. And I'm seeing from these KPIs that we're having issues. What are you doing about the KPI about that ad in this ad group for this campaign for that initiative? Now there's no hiding behind the ambiguity. It's very clear. I'm in charge of Google ads. If there's anything that is underproducing in Google ads, I should be not only aware of it, but have already come up with an idea of an answer for it, or at least what we should do in relationship to it. Doesn't mean I can't be responsible for other stuff, but that is a designation. A lot of the clarity of fixing the issue of how to fix reduced direct channel contribution is identifying who you should be talking to about actually answering that question. More importantly, answering the question before it becomes a question, which is seeing the issue with what's going on before it becomes an issue that creates an impact. Seeing variations. Now you can jump at shadows at that point. That anytime you have a daily flux of something, oh my God, should I be looking at this? Is there something I should change? Is there something to do? That's when good data helps you realize that just a Tuesday is a bad Tuesday. It consistently is a low performance traffic, or actually contrary, it usually is a very high performance traffic, which can create skewed reduction in conversions because you have a higher volume of traffic that still isn't converting, but it creates a negative impact on while you think the campaign is running. That's experience coming in with it. Now that you're down to the granular what I should be looking for, you can begin to know what to blink at and what not to blink at. And that comes to now improving how direct channel is seen. How you chase down what to do in the sense of strategy for your direct channel is where I wanted to segment the show. I wanted to change the method of discovering direct channel and understanding direct channel, and the method of how to define how to work with direct channel as the first half of the conversation. The second half of the conversation is more about then how do you change your strategies by what you see in your now KPI thresholds. See how your KPIs are performing. And then now with that, is there a change of strategy? That goes into the inclement weather sentiment, that goes into the degradation of demand to your market, that goes into the change in your pricing structures according to market wise. Because now you have to expand the conversation as to how well do you look at your comps to see how they're performing in contrast to you. In some ways, as the tide shifts, so do all the boats. So even though you may be seeing negatives, you also see that your competitors are facing negatives. But the differentiation of success is identifying what you can leverage in comparison to your competitors before they do against you, and to see whether or not there's a fair share you can steal from them, because they might be still running under the same ignorance that I discussed at the beginning of the show, which is the same methodology that we've historically done for January or on our market strategies being done again, definition of insanity, but the same result occurs: lackluster or poor performance over expectations versus under actualizations. That if they're still doing that same modality and you've become smarter because you've broken down to your KPI level and identified who's responsible for each of those in a way that causes a responsive way to be proactive to it, now all of a sudden you're able to act quickly, nimbly, and identify. That conversation will be in the next show. The next show is about how do you take now this awareness of your KPIs, learn how to do that to your competitors, look at what they're doing, what their anticipation of it is, what their successes are, and it's reflected in their rate strategy. It's reflected in their ad variations, their ad types. We'll talk about how to look at those things to know whether or not that they're just playing by checkbox, where this is what we do and this is what we do every January, or are they doing it because they are sensitive to the market and know that this is the better thing to do, because we have been watching our KPIs as well. And we know that we need to shift off of this and shift onto this because it's not doing what we thought it was going to do. There's ways of seeing that just from a third party outside, by the ads that they post, the changes that they make, the content that they're putting forward, the indexing of that content, their actual budgeting process, standardization of what they're trying to push up top. How hard are they pushing their perennials versus how hard are they pushing adaptive? Adaptive being what you've changed, perennials being something that you've left static. Those markers is what we're going to have the second conversation on. The first one now is, this is just an awareness to understand what channels do you consider to be direct channel. Of that, defining what they are in sense of their value. How much does your paid campaign produce towards your direct channel versus your OTT or your CRM, just in contrast, or meta search. And once those percentages are laid out, you go into the next layer, which is what is included in paid campaigns. Well, we have Google campaigns and we have Bing campaigns. Okay. And you know the ratio of them because you have the numbers. Our Google campaigns usually represent about 80-85% of our total business traffic. And Bing represents roughly 14 or 20%, depending. They've gotten better because of Gemini. And so because of that, now you have a portion ratio. Then you go into each one of those, but we'll pick Google. Google is okay. Out of Google, we have these many campaigns running. We have 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever it is. Great. Maybe you put it into a two division first of what is considered brand versus non-brand. And then there's campaigns in each of those. You can make as many layers as that are useful for identifying these things. So maybe you do the brand non-branded. Okay. Under brand, we have 4 campaigns or 2 campaigns. Under non-brand, we have 10 campaigns. Okay. And you go into those campaigns and we say we have 3 ad groups for this, 5 ad groups for that, 2 ad groups for that, 4 ad groups for that, whatever. And those get broken down. And in those ad groups, and the percentage relationship of each one. Brand represents 65% of your total Google Ads traffic. Great. So 45% is to your non-branded. Okay. And you have them broken down accordingly, that now if on branded side, out of the 2 campaigns you're running, one campaign represents 75%, the other one 25%. Okay, now the 75% one has 2 ad groups in it, and one ad group is 80%, the other one's 20%. Great. Now you have down to a KPI. This the ad in the ad group that is 80% has 10 keywords. Okay, so those 10 keywords are there, and now the keywords. Each one has a certain percentage value they contribute upwards. You've broken it down to such a level that you know that this keyword, if asked, and more relevant, that this keyword represents this much relationship to the top line revenue of direct channel contribution. You know it, which is knowing is half the battle kind of mentality. Knowing how this works then can bring you to the next question is, what do we do with it? How do we take what we are now aware of at such a granular level to know how to keep aware of what's going on with it, to then what do we do with it when it comes to strategizing? It's one thing to see it and say, okay, this is how it's working. Now, how do we take this information and improve what we're doing? And then that progressively goes into how does what we're doing compare to people we're competing with? And that goes into the next question: how is our market that we are competing in compared to markets that we're competing with? And then it goes into how is the market in general for travel being used by people in the sense of the demand and so forth. But that level is more of awareness than it is influencing. But exploitation of knowing the whole stream, top to bottom, your role in it, and more importantly, what you do to make your role in it, your comparison to your people that are also competing with you in your market, and your market in comparison to other markets, and those markets compared to everything. Knowing how that goes now means that if there is an ebb of transient demand, springtime in your region of which your market is in, to why people come to your market in comparison to who they look for to stay within your market, you can be more proactive about how the influencing of your KPIs, your breakdowns of what works and doesn't work, can change how you do what you're doing quickly and correctly. And more importantly, whether it's incorrect, even if you made a choice that's incorrect, you see the correlations quicker because you know the relationships of that ad or that keyword to that ad and those ads related to the ad group and the ad group related to the campaign, to know that that needs to get flexed and changed differently. And by doing that, you have the ability to be more responsive. We'll talk more about that next week when it comes to the second part of our discussion to that. But I think, not to go over and beat a drum, I think we've hit this process of discovering and understanding how things work more efficiently now than just looking at what's the larger scale of this, and well, what's all the pieces of it, and everybody around the table is looking at the other direction or pointing fingers in other ways to say, hey, I don't know if I'm directly responsible for that. I think maybe we have to go look at what's causing the issues. And then there's this whole discovery period that takes a lot of time, which continues the degradation of performance. And then when it finally is discovered as to the possible causes of this, then there's the what do we do about it conversations. Then there's the once we've decided what to do about, we got to get the buy-in of that decision to make sure that everybody's okay with that. And then from the buy-in, we have to implement what we think is going to be the corrective measure to that, which then has to get its own another buy-in. And then we have to do the implementation to that, which creates more timeline discussion or delays. And then the implementation occurs, and then there's the progress of recovery. That whole dip is reactionary. We're talking about how to break it down in a way of understanding it that you can proactively see the influencing factors before they become more impactful than they're beginning to trend, and make the corrective measures early. That makes you an adaptive participant in your market. It allows you to look at other competitors in the same light, the same optics, and to break down what they're doing to understand what kind of competitor they are. Are they blind and ignorant? Are they sensitive and savvy? And you define them in your SWOT analysis. These guys know their stuff. They're not just ghosting us our rates by $1 less every time we change our rate, or $5 more when we change our rate. They're adaptively changing their advertising because our demand to market has shifted, and that's the direction it went. And we made the change. We saw they made the change too. So they know what's going on too. We got to treat them with a respect that we need to know and do things faster, better, and keep a closer eye on them, because what they do, they might do something faster than us. We need to be as quick in responses as what we just saw them do. That's the change in strategy that we're going to talk about next week. With that, I got told that a lot of times people say I keep telling about all the places you can find us. So I'm going to trust that everybody that watches us live on our TV channel in 209 countries knows that they can do that. And if you're watching a simulcast on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and other social media channels, and all the variety of places and channels and pages that we're on, that you know that as well. You can catch us always at hospitalitychannel.tv. For our reruns, you can check our app, Apple iOS or Google Play, Hospitality Channel. Watch the TV there. It's an app. You can see that. You want to see the web version of it, you can go to talktravel.tv, see it there. We'll leave all of that except for the fact that you can contact me at any time with questions, feedback, or anything. If you're not a part of our Hospitality Marketing Club already, I would suggest if you're a hospitality marketer, go join with us. It's a peer group. It's not on Facebook or LinkedIn. It's a peer group that's on our own platform. Great conversations there. But you can always reach me at lauren@hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com. Emails, answer each and every one related to the show or the podcast. And you also can do it audibly if you want to, and go to hdm.news/talkback. I always leave an audio question that you can answer, or if you just want to give me your opinion and advice, and then give me the authorization to refer to it by name, just use it in context. It's all there for it as well. And with that, My name is Lauren Gray. I thank you for the privilege of your time and look forward to talking to you all next week.